What's up, everyone? We've got something special for you today. Both Matty Greenspan and Eric Crown will be joining me to discuss the current state of the market, long-term predictions, and much more. My name is Jackson, and welcome to this week's Market Predictions. So let's tackle the big kahuna first, Bitcoin. In Monday's crypto markets, Matty talked about how the 200-day moving average is nearing an intersection with Bitcoin's actual price. Will that intersection take place?
Go ahead, Eric. That's all you, man.
Okay, so I'm not necessarily clear on the situation. You're talking about the actual price crossing the 200-day moving average. It's nowhere near price action right now. As far as I can see, it's literally below $9,000.
Right. So, yeah, it's exactly what I've got here. The 200-day moving average is just above 8,000, and it's rising fast. So the case here is that many people have called this whole area descending triangle. So if we do get a break below, let's say 9,000-ish, then we could see the moving average coming in to act as support. That's case A. Case B would be, let's say, if the prices continue sideways, eventually the moving average itself will come up to provide the support.
I see what you're saying there. Yeah. So here's the thing, is that if Bitcoin does break below this current structure, like let's call it 9,500, I'll put on my my drawing tools right here. The 200 simple is going to be a target. It's obviously going to be coming into that 8,500 level, kind of that current trajectory, which would kind of line up with that same gap that we saw in price action from CMEs in middle of June perhaps. But actually, I don't believe if we were to actually break down, which I'm not saying that we are, but if we were to break down, I would actually be looking at this to go a little bit lower than that, actually significantly lower than that. All the way down into the upper 6,000s is technically where this measure move would suggest. I do agree with you that the longer that Bitcoin goes sideways here, the more that these moving averages have to catch up. But that's not always a good thing. We're looking at everything kind of condensed on each other right now, which tells us that we're still consolidating. But we're not really given a direction based off that until we break one of the major levels. To me, if we were to break below this 9,500-ish level right here, also the 382 Fibonacci retracement on this formation, we're not just going to be breaking down to go down to the 200 simple or 200 exponential. We're going to be going down much further. This is a complete change of behavior as far as I'm concerned in the higher time frames. Indicating a complete, new phase going on. I mean, this has been so far a relatively constructive consolidation within this region, which would, give the odds a little bit more in the favor of the bulls right now. But the second that we break formation is the second that I turn into an actual bear, and this starts to look like a bull trap, and this is going to set us up, yes, for a move down here most likely, and then I would genuinely think actually probably lower after that as well, but would want to take it one step at a time. Again, this is with the assumption that we actually do break down below that region. Myself, I think that this, I just have a feeling that it does pull through, even though that's not necessarily too much based on, based on much. But at the end of the day, man, I need to see these levels broken. And it's not even this upper level right here that really does it for me for the bulls at 11.4, even though it is kind of lined up with this upper resistance trend line and also the 0.5 fib. We need to get a higher high over this $12,000 tick right here before anything actually changes for me. Other than that, I kind of just look at it as a sloppy but somewhat healthy crypto consolidation in the way that these cryptos like to play them out. And so until we get resolution on this, and I think that we get resolution on this in the next week or two, trading in the middle of the range is just very, very difficult. There's very little opportunity in this range right here.
What do you think about that, Matty? Do you agree with him?
Yeah, it sounds quite complicated, but I think the end result here is that we both agree that Bitcoin is in a healthy consolidation.
So you would be bullish on this formation right here, Matty?
Well, at the moment, I've reduced most of the cryptos from my portfolio overall. I got a little bit bullish on the altcoins this morning because of that recent alt window, as they've been calling it. But other than that, I want to see movement before I go in heavy.
Yeah, 100%. And I've actually done the exact same thing this past week. Reduced most of my positions, small, very, 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 very small long exposure right now. But right now is the time to be waiting, in my opinion. I do think that we see a big move, like an actual massive move in the next week, maybe week and a half, something like that. Things are shaping up right now.
But why? What based on what do you say that we have to get? Because look, in my experience, it could break down, it could break up, it could go sideways for another year. Why would you say that within the next week there would be a massive movement?
Okay, so there's a few reasons right here. First and foremost, the easiest one is just that this formation right here does have an apex coming in, like early October, and typically those things like to break when they're about 60, 70 to 75% full, right? So that'd put us somewhere right around this region right here, which is actually end of this week. Not only that, but looking at volume signature on this formation, we are rapidly declining. We've been declining for the last 3 months, which does suggest that we are right around the corner from resolution, as this just has very little way to go as well. Not only that, but most importantly, perhaps, is the historical volatility percentile, which has been downtrending ever since our $14,000 high. And this is of course, if you're familiar with volatility, this is designed to contract and expand. And of course, when we get down to a level like this, which is a level that we really only see, a few times in history. I mean, the last time that we saw a level like this was in May, before that massive explosion from the $5,000 base, almost 2xing in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. We will see a big move relatively soon just based off something like this.
So you already began to touch on our next question, which is that yesterday the United States Federal Reserve made another decision to lower interest rates, which will pump more than $53 billion into the U.S. economy. BitMEX CEO Arthur Hayes tweeted today, "Quantitative easing forever is coming. Once the Fed gets religion again, get ready for hashtag Bitcoin 20,000. What exactly does he mean by quantitative easing forever? And do you agree with Hayes? Will Bitcoin be spurred on to $20,000 in light of this decision?
The Federal Reserve is basically the world's largest player in the financial markets. Whatever they say or do has a direct impact across all assets. So that's stocks, commodities, FX. For the most part, crypto is rather uncorrelated with the rest of those markets. But it seems like a lot of crypto analysts are already saying, including Erik here, is that as we go, those type of interest rate decisions will play a bigger role in Bitcoin's price action. So far, we haven't seen any point in history where a Federal Reserve announcement actually really moved the price of Bitcoin. But as they go further down this cycle where they're easing and quantitative easing and lowering interest rates, it basically what it does is it makes money more readily available, and they're basically pushing lots and lots more money into the economy. That money is mostly baseless, so what it does is it has the effect of devaluing the US dollar, devaluing the euro. This is the currency wars that have been going on for the last decade or so, where every single country wants to push down the price of their currency as much as possible and devalue their own currency. The idea is that the less value your currency has, the better it boosts your economy because more people will want to buy your stuff. So if let's say the Japanese yen is lower, more people can buy Japanese goods at a cheaper rate. So this is the currency wars. Now, Bitcoin is the main benefactor of the currency wars because Bitcoin is designed to go up in value, to have a very limited supply, and they don't keep pushing more and more baseless Bitcoins, but rather there's only 21 million coins that will ever be minted, and in that case, it basically is a deflationary asset, whereas all of the other fiat currencies are extremely inflationary.
Right. So I hear what you're saying on that, and first and foremost, this rate cut's already been priced in. As long as the expectation is met, and that's a 0.25% cut to the downside. Now, I would push back on Maddie's statement. While I do agree with most of what he said, that Bitcoin's uncorrelated with the traditional markets, I strongly disagree with that, and we can show this in mathematical way. Actually, I'll bring up screen share just one more time. So this is SPY. This is the major U.S. indice. Tracks SPX essentially. And down in this bottom pane right here, this purple histogram is actually a correlation coefficient matched up with SPY price action versus Bitcoin price action. As you can see right here, we're actually we're actually relatively positively correlated. Now, we have been on a downtrend for the last year, or actually, sorry, about half year or so. But you can see over the history of time, we've been more correlated than not. And more importantly, we can just do this by eye as well. And I really push back on these statements, not to be a stickler or anything like that, but just because this is not what we see at all, in my opinion. And you can make the decision for yourself, but I'll put up Bitcoin's price action in a line chart back here, put it on log scale. You can see just since the dawn of time for Bitcoin, anytime the traditional market major indices are rallying, anytime that they're mostly bullish on the macro, we're looking at a weekly time frame right here, they're both rallying together. Bitcoin typically tops a little bit first, and then traditional market usually bottoms a little bit first, but they're moving together on the macro. So I push back on statements like that because we are going to see Bitcoin take a more primary role in kind of playing these sorts of things out as I go back to my camera right now. So the big thing there is that, as time goes on, that is the big kind of switch that I think goes on in people's head that makes them realize Bitcoin's value, as Maddie said. When you have governments essentially printing more money, which devalues your currency that you've been, holding in a bank, and then you start seeing your bank is now charging you interest when we go into negative rates, which is probably, not too long in the distant future, as we've seen other first world countries already do this, Japan being one, Germany being another, I believe. People's brains are going to start to switch on, I'd imagine, and start to see Bitcoin. Oh, this is something that actually, the supply is limited, whereas my fiat currency keeps on going down, and that's when it starts to make sense for people to actually adopt, in a real way, this asset, in my opinion.
So you think 20,000 is possible?
I think 20,000 is possible. Yes. It's really going to come. I mean, we're still kind of in experimental phase. At the end of the day, it's still an extremely small market, but 20,000 very much possible. Yes, absolutely.
So I wanted to just point out, Eric, that correlation does not necessarily equal causation, and I get what you're saying, that Bitcoin and the stock market have been moving in the same direction on a macro level, and I do believe that the cause, for the most part, has been federal easing over the last 10 years. But what we need to really remember is that Bitcoin is only about 10 years old. So we've never actually been in a situation where we've seen a bear market in the stocks and what kind of effect that might have on Bitcoin. So I think it's to make those kind of statements that there's kind of a macro correlation. I think that it's still a little bit early. This chart actually is...
You could say it's a little bit early, but I do believe 10 years is pretty good. We've gone through a few hefty corrections in the stock market, but no, right.
10 years that we've never seen a dip in the Dow Jones of more than 10, 20%.
Right. But there's been corrections. It moves with it on the macro with corrections. We still need to see what happens in a bear market, obviously. But that right now is, we just haven't really gone through that.
Bitcoin, but what Bitcoin has never done before is actually react to a Fed statement. And if you look at it on a day-to-day
I'm not
correlation
sure that's
level,
true. I'm
the
not sure that's
correlation
true.
coefficient is negative 0.2, which is almost non-existent, meaning that on a day-to-day level, if the stock market goes up or if the stock market goes down,
hold on, wait.
Has no effect whatsoever on Bitcoin.
This is disingenuous. On a day-to-day level, you're not talking about trend. You're talking about day-to-day activity, which is going to be uncorrelated. We need to look at the macro. We need to look at trends, which is going to be shown by higher time frames, not a daily.
Well, you just pointed out that the Federal Reserve is likely to be a catalyst for a Bitcoin movement.
Yeah.
So that's a day-to-day markets.
No, these get priced in way before. We know about these meetings way in advance. The rate cut has been known about for, like a month, maybe 2 months in advance. These things are known kind of for the most part, and it's only deviations from the expectation.
This rate cut has been an absolute certainty only over the last week. It's been forecasted over about 2 weeks ago. So if what you're saying is correct, that the Fed is going to be a catalyst for a huge Bitcoin movement, by your own logic, it should have happened already.
No. What you saw, if you're going to talk about happened before already, then what you're seeing is a race over the last, over the last few years, really, to decrease interest rates, right? Well, what have we seen in the last 6-7 months?
No,
of Bitcoin?
Not over the last few years. 2018 was actually a rate increase cycle. The Fed has only flip-flopped on their policy within the last 6 months.
Yes. Okay. In the last 6 months, what has Bitcoin done in the last 6 months?
I can show you on the. It's
no. Just what Bitcoin has literally more than 4x in the last 6 months as they decline rates each and every time.
No. What I'm saying is over the last 6 months, they've been increasing. They've been increasing in their interest rates. So here we can see. So since 2016, they've been on a tightening cycle, and only very, very recently, last month, they decreased their interest rate for the first time since the financial crisis. That's like within the last month or two.
Correct.
Before that,
but
they were extremely
with the rest,
hawkish.
Hold on. It's not just the U.S. The rest of the world has been taking down their rates.
Correct.
A lot. So let's not just focus on the U.S. because the U.S. does not make up the whole market.
Well, they're the 500-pound gorilla. But for your sake, we'll continue.
Maybe, maybe not. That Japan's a major player, China's a major player. It's a world market, man. We can't really say that the U.S. decides for it. The world in general has been lowering interest rates, and I'm sure that you would agree with that over the last 6-7 months for sure. Absolutely. So to me, that is the actual catalyst itself. Once those expectations come around, that's when the catalyst happens. So we've already seen most of this move precipitated from that. What's happening now is we're waiting to see the next sort of actual actions if they do match up. And any sort of, like I said, any sort of deviation from that expectation of a 0.25% cut is going to be met by, violent swings. If we just cut it a 0.25%, probably not going to see all that much until the next sort of, phase, I guess, begins.
Since we're talking about price forecasts, what are your long-term predictions about where Bitcoin's price will be by the end of, let's say, this year?
Oh, my answer hasn't changed. I try to shy away from price predictions. I don't know the future. Anything can happen. So between $100 and $1 million.
Nice. I like it. Okay, so I can go back to the screen share for a second here. I'd give kind of like a bearish prediction and a bullish prediction. This is expected moves with regards to historical volatility. I'm a huge believer in volatility. And in this case, we can kind of come up with ranges. So the way to look at this right now is we are squeezing so damn hard that a huge move is around the corner. I'd still stick with what I said in about a week to a week and a half. And then the way that we can kind of goose this around and actually get the probabilities for the end of year is I'll go in right here. And we can do how many days until the end of the year? Maybe we have like another 4 months or 3 months or something like that. So it's going to be around like maybe 120 days perhaps. And then we can come up with these ranges. They're not going to be all that helpful, but if we were to come up with like the most likely range by end of year, to the upside, we're probably looking somewhere right around like 12,000, 13,000. To the downside, we'd probably be looking somewhere around 8,000, it's closing around end of year. I don't really have a strong opinion other than that. I'd still be waiting for resolution on this whole formation right here. It's the same thing that we spoke about earlier. Yeah, I know it's not like too sexy to talk about, but unfortunately, that's as far as like being a legitimate trader, that's really all you can do. An analyst can tell you exactly what's going to happen, but they don't have any sort of legitimate skin in the game. So I would kind of back off as well as Maddie and say, hey man, if we break to the upside of that formation, I'll be looking for a closing price end of year, probably around 13,000. If we break to the downside, I'll be looking somewhere around maybe 8,000 end of year.
Much more narrow range than mine.
Fair enough.
So altcoins are looking very bullish at the moment, while Bitcoin seems to have stagnated in the mid-low 10,000s. Google Trends show that the term Bitcoin is less popular now than at any time since April 2019. Is apathy toward Bitcoin spurring on interest in altcoins?
Generally speaking, Bitcoin is not moving very much, and you do see a lot of progression, especially in a lot of these altcoin networks. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that most alts have some upside here. We've been saying this for the last week and a half, 2 weeks now. I think that they have some more upside. As far as like the reason for it, is there like apathy towards Bitcoin? I don't know about that. And I think we're just kind of going through the cycles, really. It seems to me, from what I've looked at in this whole crypto sphere, is that altcoins do best when Bitcoin is mostly sideways, and Bitcoin's about as sideways as you can get right now. So that's going to benefit the altcoins the most, in my opinion. As far as like people's general attitude towards them, I mean, it's hard to call something bullish after literally still being down about 80 to 90% off their highs. But I do think that they have some upside here. I do think that they get some continuation. Looking at Ethereum and Litecoin right now, they both look like they want some more to me. Other than that, don't really have too much else to say. I don't really spend too much time actually looking at altcoins, actually.
So I know, Eric, you don't deal as much with altcoins, but Maddie, do you have any predictions about where Ethereum or Ripple's XRP price might be at the end of the year as well?
My same predictions, my friend. I don't make them. I just look when you're trading, and a lot of people like to focus on predictions and price targets. That's not really my style. My style is allocation. Tell me how much percentage of your portfolio is in each specific altcoin. That's going to give you a much more robust way to trade. So For me, it's all about diversification. And when you see kind of an opportunity, I don't know where Ripple's going to or XRP is going to end up by the end of the year. And I really don't care. I see some movement. I feel that there's momentum. I'll allocate another 0.5% or 1% of my portfolio. That's really all there is to it. When the momentum stops, whenever that may be, I'll take some of the profits off the table.
How do you feel about that, Eric? Do you agree with what Matty just said and his view on altcoins?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Madi actually completely nailed something that I think is so beautiful. And that is people want predictions. People want all that good stuff. But as far as trading goes, you don't really need to make predictions to make money. That's not what trading really is. I know it's sexy and it gets the views and everything like that. I guess if I had to call an end of year price for what did you want, like Ripple and Ethereum? Ethereum probably hanging around like the $200 mark. Ripple probably around like the 30-cent mark. If I had to guess, again, it's going to really, to me, it matters most what Bitcoin does first. Bitcoin sets a pace and then the altcoins follow. Bitcoin breaks down here, then the altcoin market probably goes back down to the gutter. If Bitcoin breaks up here, then they probably get hurt versus Satoshis, but they'll likely benefit versus US dollar. And that's kind of where I'd see it, maybe end of year, something like that.
So even though Bitcoin's trading sideways right now and altcoins seem to be getting bullish or being more volatile, you still think that altcoins will be following Bitcoin's lead once Bitcoin starts moving again?
For now, yeah. We still are in a pretty immature market. It's still extremely low market cap. We're dealing with literally less than $250 billion, which is nothing for the whole crypto space. And most of these things, they're likely to follow Bitcoin. If you look at the whole on the whole, most things, if you just had to take a gander at it, are going to be doing whatever Bitcoin does in a slightly more emotional way, on the macro.
I would disagree with you there. Look, as it sits, Ether, XRP, and several others are up double digits, 20% over the last week, whereas Bitcoin has been largely flat. And I think that if that dynamic even continues for another day, you're going to have people selling Bitcoin to try and catch those moves in the altcoins.
Hey, and tell me,
there's no way about it.
Hold on. Let's just think this one through for a second here. How much did Bitcoin double, or how much did Bitcoin go up from its December lows?
Off the top of my head, 150%.
No, much more than
maybe?
that. About a 4x, a little bit more than a 4x. Went from about 3,100 to almost 14,000. How much has Ripple gone up in that time?
Well, we can put it on the chart real quick. It's not difficult.
Right. It's not going to be anywhere near that 4x.
Okay,
is
so
what
for
I'm getting
Bitcoin,
at.
we're looking at 200-ish percent, 220%. For Litecoin, about the same. Binance Coin is up 384%, whereas XRP is only up 11%. So, look, if people all of a sudden say, hey, I don't know, XRP has been underperforming and it's due a comeuppance, it would not be far-fetched for just people to sell a little bit of their Bitcoin and push that into XRP. Or for the other, or the other way, people could say, hey, look, Litecoin's zooming again. It's been performing fantastically this year. Let me get some more of that or reallocate that in my portfolio. And that's what I've done a little bit this morning. Bitcoin is no longer the top crypto in my portfolio as of today. And if that situation continues, I'll get even more aggressive on the altcoins.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not necessarily sure where you're getting those numbers from though. Bitcoin's up 350%. Bitcoin's up 350% from where it bottomed out to where it is right now. Litecoin is up 250%, and Ripple's up 30% from its December lows. So
I'm not going to argue with you on that.
Right. So my point is that on the macro, Bitcoin is still the major gainer, still kind of sets the pace. And then the altcoins, they just come out like a later date from what I see right now. Can that change in the future? Absolutely. But like I said, we're still pretty small market here.
In general, I would agree with you. All I'm saying is that if the situation continues like it has over the last week, if it continues another day or two, then you could probably expect some money to come out of Bitcoin in order to fund some of those altcoin positions.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And in that case, you would get a divergence rather than something going in the same direction. But past performance is not an indication of future results, right?
Thank you everyone for watching. That was Maddie Greenspan and Eric Crown joining me on this week's Market Predictions. My name is Jackson, and always remember to like, subscribe, and hodl.
Cointelegraph. Like, subscribe, and hodl.